Rosenstein is the only person standing out there between President Trump and Robert Mueller. His defense of Mueller and the Justice Department have made him a prime target of the right wing. However, Rosenstein was also instrumental to the White House in May of last year when President Trump decided to fire FBI Director James Comey. It was Rod Rosenstein who ultimately drafted that memo that the president used to justify Comey's firing. In an explosive story tonight, the New York Times is now reporting that Rosenstein told colleagues he believed he was used. Quote, in the days after the FBI Director James Comey was fired last year, Rosenstein repeatedly expressed anger about how the White House used him to rationalize the firing, saying the experience damaged his reputation, according to 4 people familiar with his outbursts. Well, those sources described the Deputy Attorney General as seemingly conflicted. Quote, Rosenstein alternately defended his involvement, expressed remorse at the tumult it unleashed, and said the White House had manipulated him. However, if Rosenstein did feel manipulated, there may be good reason. That's because the president's behavior in the days that followed Comey's firing suggested he used Rosenstein's memo as an alibi. Rather than cite the memo, Trump told Lester Holt, however, that the Russia investigation was the reason he fired Comey.
But regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
Oh, yeah. Good. Well, the president also met with Russian diplomats in the Oval Office, and he repeatedly told them, I faced great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off. Well, it was after those statements that Rosenstein appointed the special counsel to oversee the probe. According to the New York Times, upon learning of the appointment, Mr. Trump erupted in anger, saying he needed someone overseeing the investigation who would be loyal to him. I'm joined right now by the author of this new New York Times report, Michael Schmidt of the Times, who's also an MSNBC contributor. Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee. And Barbara McQuaid is a former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst. I want to start with Michael about this. This is a hell of a story because it talks about how what we thought at the time that Rosenstein was doing what the president wanted him to do, but not what he thought was really the whole story.
Rosenstein had been Deputy Attorney General for a week and a half when this happens. The president wanted to send this letter to Jim Comey that said why he wanted to get rid of him. The White House counsel saw it, Don McGahn. He said, this is not a good idea. We need to come up with a cleaner reason for this. The president's letter was rambling. It went on, and it also mentioned Russia, the Russia investigation. So McGahn brings in Sessions and Rosenstein. Rosenstein offers to write this memo. The memo is ultimately the main argument the White House uses to explain the Comey firing. They stand on the White House lawn the night of the firing, and they read from the letter and explain to people that Comey had to go because he was too harsh on Hillary Clinton.
If you're Robert Mueller and his associates, and you now realize, or you've realized now for months perhaps, that Rosenstein felt he was used, and he didn't feel he was being accurate and certain and all honest about the reasons for the firing, what would that tell you about obstruction of justice?
Well, Mueller's known this probably for a year. This is nothing that is that
But the public didn't know it.
The public did not know it. But this is the thing. This is a very important period of time. It's a little more than a week between when Comey is fired and Mueller is appointed. And what Trump defenders and Trump's lawyers would say, well, Rosenstein was more than happy to be part of the Comey firing, and then several days later appoints Mueller to investigate the same thing that he was a part of. He's now overseeing it, and he's a chief witness in this.
Well, let me go to the congressman on this. First of all, Congressman Swalwell, thank you for joining us from Stanford out there. What do you make of the fact that now we know on the record from the New York Times, this hell of a report here, that Rosenstein knew and said so at the time he was used, that wasn't the reason for the firing of Comey. The reason was probably Russia and the cover-up.
Of course the president used him, Chris. The president uses everyone around him, and right now he's trying to fool the American people that he really cares about them. It's always been about Donald Trump. I don't believe Rod Rosenstein should recuse himself. This is a question that he has posed to the Department of Justice. I believe he was sincere when he asked them if he should recuse themselves, and they have advised that he shouldn't. So Republicans now have a real interest in whether he should be recused. We saw that at our Judiciary Committee hearing, but that's not because they want to make sure that this investigation is done right. It's because they want to delay, obstruct, and do everything they can to stop Bob Mueller from making the progress he needs to make in this investigation. And now we must insist that Rosenstein and Mueller stay, and if Rosenstein is fired, it would be treated the same as if Mueller were fired.
Barbara, it always seemed to me, and I think that most people following this whole Russia investigation, at the heart of an obstruction, and if you want to believe there was obstruction, was the firing of Comey, because Comey was coming at this president. And the president got rid of Comey because of that reason. He came up with other reasons, thanks to the help of Rosenstein, who agreed, as Deputy Attorney General, to craft a memo that suggested, in fact, claimed it wasn't a cover-up. It was really just because it had something to do with other issues, the way that Comey treated Hillary Clinton in the campaign, etc. What's this mean to an obstruction investigation?
Yeah, I think this is one more piece of evidence that could add to a theory of obstruction of justice. You know, when someone lies about something they did or offers a pretext for something they did, it causes you to wonder if they are not hiding their consciousness of guilt. I know what I did was wrong, therefore I have to come up with a lie that explains the real reason. Whenever there's a jury question on obstruction of justice, and in this instance maybe it would be a Senate question, whoever is the fact finder, they're told in their instructions that because no one can read someone else's mind to determine what was in someone's mind and their intent, you have to look at all of the facts and circumstances, the totality of the circumstances, what a person said and did. So I think this is one more item on the list that Robert Mueller can point to about what was said and done that could add to the mix to establish obstruction of justice and that corrupt intent that's necessary.
One more item on the list. Anyway, to the congressman's earlier point, Rosenstein was asked if he would recuse himself after overseeing the special counsel's probe because of his role in Comey's firing. Let's watch what he said.
It seems like you should be recused from this more so than Jeff Sessions, just because you were involved in making decisions affecting both prongs of this investigation. Why haven't you done that?
Congressman, I can assure you that if it were appropriate for me to recuse, I'd be more than happy to do so and let somebody else handle this, but it's my responsibility to do it.
Well, there we have a problem there. Michael Schmidt, you're reporting today. What is it going to do? It seems like in the kind of almost twisted way in which the opposition to this investigation have operated, they might say, well, you know, the fact that this Rosenstein was upset about the fact he was used by the president biased him to the point when he went out and hired Robert Mueller to investigate the president. I know how they think. But it's another Benghazi to them, another weird rabbit hole to go down.
But this shows all the different sort of roles that Rosenstein is playing at the same time. Despite the fact that he was part of the Comey firing in favor of doing that, you have Representative Swalwell, a Democrat, saying we really need to keep him around. For the Democrats, they think he's their best bet, and they're afraid of what Trump would put at the top of the justice. That's sort of their red line for them. Yeah. I don't know if they can enforce the red line. They don't have the power to do that, but they keep on saying, oh, you can't do that.
Well, Congressman, to that point, it seems to me, as we're sitting around here with the producers today for this program, we're trying to figure out what stops this president from getting rid of Mueller. What stops him is Rod Rosenstein and Jeff Sessions to some extent, but mainly Rosenstein, who appointed him. Is that true, and is that why the Republicans on your committee and elsewhere seem to always be targeting Rosenstein from a variety of directions?
Yeah, first, Chris, they're trying to put an asterisk on this investigation should it bring more indictments, especially if it hits the president or his family. But what stops the president is public sentiment. He wants to be popular. He wants to be liked. That is more important than doing the right thing. We saw that when it came to separating mothers from their children at the border. Only because it became unpopular did he do the right thing. And I think he fears, because the American people have been quite loud about this, and the public polling shows this, that if he were to fire Mueller or if he were to fire Rosenstein, that Republicans would move on him and they would view that as obstruction of justice. I fear, though, that the committee that would have to hold him responsible first, the House Judiciary Committee, is lost, because they're doing all they can right now to make sure that he has a green light to fire Mueller and Rosenstein.
Well,
but more senior members are not
translate.
With him.
Nunes means do nothing. Anyway, do you think if he were to fire a Mueller or try to fire Rosenstein, rather, that would Nixonize him? Trump?
Yes. Yes.
As I mentioned, go ahead.
To the leadership in the Republican Party, I believe that is their own red line, because that's also where the public is on this. And the polling, again, reflects that. But at the House Judiciary Committee, they are his fixers in Congress. That is, you know, about 20 Michael Cohens sitting there trying to fix this investigation in the president's favor.
Well, it must be great sitting next to them. By the way, I thought it was interesting they separate the staffs, the minority and the majority staffs, by some kind of partition. Do you think that was part of the effort so they could go about their business of saving this president's neck without your committee and staff people getting involved?
Yes, they have taken away the bipartisan comedy that we've had in prior Congresses, again, solely to protect the president, not to protect the democracy or the ballot box in our future elections. And I think they're going to pay a price in November, Chris, because people just want someone to push the big red button that stops the wrecking ball. That's Donald Trump.
Well, as I mentioned, this comes as Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, finds himself under attack by House Republicans seeking to undermine him or otherwise sabotage this whole Russian probe. In that Judiciary Committee hearing yesterday, Republicans who have effectively swamped the Justice Department with document requests accused Rosenstein of hiding information from them. Here's a tense exchange with Congressman Jim Jordan, one of the
Mr. Rosenstein,
Tea Partiers.
why are you keeping information? Mr. Rosenstein, why are you keeping information from Congress?
Congressman, I'm not keeping any information from Congress.
And I want to know why you won't give us what we've asked for.
Sir, I certainly hope that your colleagues are not under that impression. That is not accurate, sir. And
it is accurate. We have caught you hiding information.
Your statement that I'm personally keeping information from you, trying to conceal information.
You're the boss, Mr. Rosenstein.
That's correct. And my job is to make sure that we respond to your concerns. We have, sir.
Well, even Congressman Rep.Gowdy, who once defended the special counsel, piled on there, urging Rosenstein to expedite the Mueller investigation. Here he goes.
We've seen the bias. We've seen the bias. We need to see the evidence. If you have evidence of wrongdoing by any member of the Trump campaign, present it to the damn grand jury. Whatever you got, finish it the hell up, because this country is being torn apart.
I've heard suggestions that we should just close the investigation. I think the best thing we can do is finish it appropriately and reach a conclusion.
Well, Gowdy, that's Congressman Gowdy's criticism of the pace of the Russia probe is disingenuous at best. As the chairman of the Benghazi committee, remember that one? Gowdy spent 2.5 years investigating Hillary Clinton, which concluded without a single indictment. It got nowhere because there was nowhere to go. In contrast, the Mueller probe has gone on for a little more than a year and has already produced Mueller 20 indictments. You know, I want to go back to Congressman Swalwell, who's the politician here. You know, this reminds me of an era of the Nixon probe, which led to the removal of the president by resignation. There was an era toward the end when the Nixon defenders, a small cadre still around, began to say, get off his back, leave him alone. Rabbi Korf was this conservative churchman who basically led the cause. It became almost ludicrous. I've noticed that with 90% of Republican voters supporting Trump now, that people like Gowdy, even the guys like he, are jumping aboard the last chance saloon here.
That's right, Chris. But again, the American people want to see this investigation concluded. However, to Mr. Gowdy, I would say, when you lie to investigators, when you tamper with witnesses, as Paul Manafort has done, and when you refuse to sit in the chair, even when you've been given the questions that the FBI wants to ask you, it's going to take longer. So if you do that, we could finish it the hell up.
Is the president going to testify this year or not?
No, I don't think he would ever do that. No, I don't see him ever doing that. He's never met the truth in his life, and he does not want to meet this investigation team.
Thank you so much, Michael Schmidt. Great reporting, as always. U.S. Congressman Eric Swalwell out in Stanford and Barbara McQuaid. Rely on your expertise. Coming up with President Trump on the attack, it's time for the resistance to fight back, don't you think? Democrats are facing a 5-alarm fire now when it comes to the Supreme Court. Even President Obama's out there warning about this and warning his party personally. Plus, new reporting that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly's on his way out the door. It's no wonder Trump's apparently decided that his own instincts, think about that, his instincts are better than anyone else's thoughts. And he's sick of having a hall monitor. And further proof today that the president's looking for someone to be his trumpet. A Fox News executive, isn't that great, is set to become communications director. The echo chamber will be official. The Hardball Roundtable tackles that, and the administration's secret campaign to get Justice Kennedy to retire at their time at convenience. That would be this July, so they can pick a substitute before they lose the Senate. Finally, let me finish tonight with a word about what happened yesterday in Annapolis among those straight news reporters for that paper. This is Hardball with the Action News.
neo-Nazis coming out of fields carrying torches in one of the historic cities in America, followed by and accompanied by white supremacists, and then being objected to by other citizens and the president saying they're good people in both places. Come on, man. This is a battle for the soul of America. This is a battle for the soul of America. We cannot afford to lose it.
Welcome back to Harbor. For many people, this week was a sad reminder of just how divisive President Trump has been and made this country. On the border, there were reports of toddlers being forced into court. Imagine, in a court alone because their families are seeking asylum. At the Supreme Court, the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy created a very real possibility. The fate of issues like abortion rights, the environment, unions, union rights, guns, gun rights will fall into the hands of a partisan court firmly aligned with the Republican Party. At a fundraiser on Thursday night, in fact, former President Barack Obama gave some of his most pointed remarks since he left the presidency. According to Politico, Obama told Democratic donors that night they were right to be concerned. But he said they should not want to wait for the perfect message or messenger, I think, in order to vote. While never mentioning President Trump by name, he warned Democrats not to underestimate Trump's brand of politics. Fear is powerful, he said, but he added, the majority of the American people prefer a story of hope. A majority of the American people prefer a country that comes together rather than being divided. Well, we'll see about that, won't we? We saw examples of this in last year's massive Women's March, which brought together millions of people to advocate for human rights, women's rights, and health care. Look at those, all those cities converging in one point. Yesterday, roughly 600 protesters were arrested near the U.S. Capitol, demanding an end to forced family separations at the border. Among them was U.S. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapur from Washington State. She joins me now, along with Sam Stein, politics editor of the Daily Beast. Love that name. And Jason Johnson, politics editor of something more calm, The Root. Thank you. You're not with the Beast, you're with The Root. Anyway, well, thank you. Congresswoman, you're at the ramparts, as we used to say in the 60s. You're out there. You got handcuffed. No, you didn't get handcuffed.
No handcuffs.
What was your protest about? What did it involve, and why did you do it?
Well, 2,500 women from all over the country came to really show their moral outrage at the president and his policy, zero tolerance, zero humanity, as I say, policy, putting kids in cages, putting parents who are seeking asylum into prisons. And so they were there to say, we're putting ourselves on the line. I went to speak to them, actually, but I was so moved by how passionate they were and, you know, the stories that we were all telling. And so I sat down with them and I got arrested. I believe civil disobedience is an important tactic to really push an issue to the forefront.
Well, that's good to watch, and it's a participatory democracy, as we called it in the old days in the 60s. Yeah, but I got to tell you, he's about to pick the decisive member of the Supreme Court. Somebody will be there for, he thinks, 45 years, perhaps, sitting on the bench.
This is a horrible, horrible thing. I do think that if we can make it clear to the American people what's at stake, that this will also help us to get a wave out across the country, make sure that we win back the House, make sure that we introduce some checks and balances. That's what we don't have.
What good is it if they have the election and they pick the court justice, the decisive fifth member out of 9 people, the fifth one makes the difference, before the election?
Well, that is, we got to, as you have said over and over and over.
I will keep saying they got to find a way to stop it. They got to come up with a plan.
They've got to stop it, and that's just.
If old McConnell passes it by 1 vote, everybody in the press will say, what a brilliant parliamentarian he was to do it with just 1 vote. Well, if he's brilliant to do it, it doesn't take brilliance to stop him, Jason.
No, and this is the thing. There's 2 issues. It's always hard to run on the Supreme Court, but now people can, right? It's not just abortion, because there's going to be some people in the country like, I don't know how they feel about that. But it's also, this is the justice who will decide if the president can pardon himself, because that's the end game.
You mean this president?
Yes, this president can pardon
himself. If he gets his way.
If he gets his way. So those are the 2 issues. And I think it's not just about the first person he picks. The Republicans play the long game. They may pick somebody ridiculous at first, let the Democrats fool themselves into thinking, okay, we got that person to go, and then pick someone more moderate. They've got to be prepared to fight all the way until the end. There's got to be some brilliant parliamentarian out there who knows how to stall this.
You know, Sam, I think a lot of this changed in 2000 when the Supreme Court picked the president. I know presidents picked the Supreme Court. In 2000, they picked the president.
Yes.
5 of them, including Ken. And I've always wanted to know how they got cert, how somebody in Florida, Jim Baker, somebody got the word to the Supreme Court, oh, come on down here and take over this election, stop the count, and you guys vote. And by the way, they voted entirely in partisan lines. Right. 5 Republicans on the court gave the presidency to W. W gave us the Iraq War. It all happened because of the court.
Yeah, I mean,
it's partisan voting.
I know there's a lot of anguish right now among Democrats about the likelihood that the court will be pulled to the right and tarnish the court
to the Republican side, not just
tarnish the court as essentially a functioning arm of the Republican Party. But the truth is, as you just illuminated, which is the court's reputation has been damaged for a while now, and it's not just Bush v. Gore. Citizens United was a case that people thought was unfairly decided. A bunch of 5-4 cases that have come down where it really is almost predictable in advance what the decision is going to be. Yeah. And so we had this sort of veneer of bipartisanship, that the court was immune to this type of partisan influences. The truth is, I'm not really sure. And I'm not really sure, because you can go back to the FDR days, the court packing days, but certainly there was an aura and an era where the court
I think with Nixon, when they came out unanimously and said release the tapes, they spoke as a body, almost of an elevated body.
To that point, some of those judges were appointed by Nixon. So to your point about how this court will have to decide on the potential that Trump gets to pardon himself, there is maybe a small sliver of hope that there can be people who rise above.
Your thoughts about this, because you sit in the legislative branch. You heard Trump today, he referred to my government. I have never heard that phrase in my... We don't have a government. Britain has governments because they have a parliamentary system. We have the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the courts. And there's nobody can say my government.
He has been saying that about the Department of Justice, you know, the loyalty pledges. I mean, that is how he thinks about this, which is what is so dangerous. And I do think one of the things that worries me about how we are electing Supreme Court justices today, or appointing Supreme Court justices today, is the influence of big money. You look at, you look at Gorsuch and how much money was put into that race in order to...
You're calling it a race.
Well,
it was a race.
Because the senators vote on that, and they put money into those targeted states with those specific senators, and they're going to do it again. They've already started doing it again. So that, that does worry me, and I think that we have to continue to call for everybody to play hardball.
It's an amazing coalition now, which is Fox, the president, and now increasingly perhaps the Supreme Court. President Trump sat down with Fox News today to discuss what he's looking for in the Supreme Court. That's sort of an intramural conversation. Here's what he said.
Are you going to ask your nominees beforehand how they might vote on Roe versus Wade?
Well, that's a big one, and probably not. They're all saying, don't do that, you don't do that, you shouldn't do that, but I'm putting conservative people on. And I'm very proud of Neil Gorsuch. He has been outstanding. His opinions are, so well written, so brilliant. And I'm going to try and do something like that, but I don't think I'm going to be so specific.
I can't imagine this particular president. He's obviously as smart as most politicians, but sitting down and reading the opinions of Judge Gorsuch, I don't think he sat down and read them. That contradicts what the president promised to do back in October of 2016. Let's listen to what he promised as a candidate.
Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court.
Well, that's pretty clear.
That's pretty clear.
How does he know they are when he doesn't ask them?
He has lots of conversations long before, and I read that article that said he's actually been courting Kennedy. I mean, through his son.
We'll get to that in the show tonight, of this elaborate sort of seduction to get him to quit, not just this year, but to quit by a date certain, which gives the Supreme Court.
Well, the thing about Supreme Court confirmation hearings and processes is it's so much kabuki theater. Right. Everyone will say, I can't answer these things, it's potentially going to come before me, when in truth we know that Donald Trump wants someone to overturn Roe. We know that the Federalist Society is pushing this. We know that Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans are mostly interested in this. And the question we really are waiting for is, will Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski demand that any prospective nominee answer that question? And to be honest, they're going to dance around it.
I think it's going to be Amy Barrett, and I think they've got it figured out already.
They probably do, but like I said, I don't know if that's going to be their first run. I think they may think that this is on the long term. The other issue is this, and Barrett qualifies, and there'll be probably some surprise people. They're going to pick somebody who's like 15 minutes out of law school. Like, they're going to pick the youngest person.
45 years.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to go with life expectancy with this crowd. Anyway, in a surprise appearance on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert last night, Jon Stewart also called on Democrats to fight. Here he is, the cheerleader from the right side. Let's watch.
I just want to say, if there's one hallmark to your presidency that I think we're finding the most difficult, is that no matter what you do, it always comes with an extra layer of gleeful cruelty. Donald, you could have absolutely made a more stringent border policy that would have made your point about enforcement. But I guess it wouldn't have felt right without a Dickensian level of villainy. And what Donald Trump wants is for us to stop calling his cruelty and fear and divisiveness wrong, but to join him in calling it right. And this we cannot do. And by not yielding, and I say, by not yielding, we will prevail. Unless, of course, the Democratic leadership continues to be a bunch of feckless.
Until that last outburst, he was Adlai Stevenson compared to what we have now, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, look, you need to say that. Look, you know, Jon Stewart always represented that sort of rage of the left, and it was first the New York left, now it's the sort of entire left. But resistance is the only way to go at this particular point. And the leadership of the Democratic Party is behind the times for how frustrated and angry their base is. Yeah. And perhaps when they're all gone, if they win if the Democrats take over the House this fall, we'll see some more active leadership. Because right now,
New York will take over the House this fall. Anyway, Cortez is leading the way. Anyway, U.S. Congressman Jayapal, Sam Stein.
Yes.
And Jason Johnson. Real simple pronunciations in this wonderful one here. Up next, rumors are swirling. The Chief of Staff, John Kelly, the general, four-star general, is on his way out. And if a four-star general was somebody who said they can't keep this guy in line, nobody